research and science. So I really dug into research, looking for sources who were credentialed experts and information backed up by scientific studies. So I'm going to go over what I found, including some things that can help us improve in these areas. But feel free to jump in with comments. Is there someone who can let me know if there's a comment or question? Because I might not see it.
Sierra, can you watch for those? I'm so bad at noticing. If you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll watch for them.
Okay, awesome. And then afterward, I'll drop in the chat a list of resources, and that'll include everything I used in the presentation plus some other ones. And then there's also a worksheet too. So hopefully you'll find it interesting and helpful. The first thing is confidence. We're going to listen for 8 minutes to part of a podcast, and the host gives a really great example of confidence in action, and then they both give their definition of confidence, so then we can kind of talk about that. Okay, so one thing I love about that is that Chevra, while she had a lot of experience, she'd only recently received her certification in project management, but she saw this very complex issue that Heather had detailed on the board, and she had enough confidence in herself and her training to know that she could take that on and to just say, "Yeah, I've got this," and that landed her the job. And another thing was that she talked about not only, or when Heather was talking about Chevra's attributes of confidence that she saw in her, she said that not only was she impressed with her confidence, but how she worked with others to help them build their confidence. So that was impressive to me. So that link to the podcast is in the resources as well if you want to listen to the whole thing. Has anyone here read the book, The Confidence Code? And if so, unmute yourself and tell me what you thought about it. Janice, I saw your hand.
I was waiting to see if anyone else would talk. Yeah, I read it. And we, like the year we started the WIP group years ago, we read like the short, like 10-page version that was in the Atlantic. So a number of people have been exposed to the concepts, but I really liked the book. And even just if you can find that article in the Atlantic, I really like it as well. The concepts in there that kind of stood out to me is that we have control of building our own confidence. You know, we're not all given some amount of preset confidence and that's all we're going to have our own lives. That there's things that we can do to help build it and to manage it. One of the other things that I remember that really stood out to me too was kind of the concept of almost fake it till you make it, which kind of goes with what she was just saying in the podcast as far as like, I don't know, when I was younger, I was really, really shy, like painfully shy, which now I kind of recognize as anxiety. And I remember going to a sports camp where I was going to have a roommate that I didn't know. And I was sitting in the car, like crying. And my dad was like, "She doesn't know you're shy. Just go pretend you're not and you'll be okay." And really, like, that seems so simple. And it also seems really hard at the same time. But that was kind of like my first step, like, oh, yeah, he's right. She doesn't know that. And that was like my first step to building confidence. And then as you like have positive experiences and build on those, and then I really like too what she was saying as far as sharing it, because I think that came out in the book as well. So as you help make other people confident, you get more confident yourself.
I like that. And that's one of the things we talk about later, that as you have positive experience, it helps build your confidence. I do not like public speaking, but I've had a lot of jobs where I've had to do it, and I had to take a presentations class in school. So um, I had a professor once who told me this was stupid to do something that you don't feel that you're great at, but I don't care. I think he's wrong. I always would volunteer to be the one to give our presentations during my MBA program for my group, because I knew that the more I did it, the better I would get at it. And then if I like, I can't, don't, you just don't even need to know how many hours I practiced this one. So I think that it's a combination of having some wins and then practicing things so that you can feel more confident about them help quite a bit. I'm glad that you said that about that book, because I read mixed reviews on it. One of the things I read was that kind of it spends a lot of time comparing women to men and saying kind of men are more confident, we should be like men. And I went, I'm not going to read that. That's not the kind of content that I need in my life. Um, but I'll read that Atlantic article and see if maybe it's something that'll resonate with me more then. So, because I don't feel like as women we need to be like men to be successful. We need to be successful being women.
It's been a while since I actually read it, but my memory on kind of that is like they actually go through the biology, like the hormones and stuff, and talk about why the biology naturally leads men to be more confident. And then again, like what you can do to increase those hormones in your own body. So,
oh, I love that. I love anything that ties in with science. So, okay, now I'm going to read it. So, in that, they gave us 3 definitions of confidence. The one from the Confidence Code, the stuff that turns thoughts into actions. And then Heather, the host, was believing in and trusting yourself and your ability to achieve what you want out of life. And Chebra's was believing in yourself and knowing what you're capable of achieving and having a support system believes in you. And I thought it was interesting that she added that component because it does, when we look at the research later, it does talk about if you are struggling, you ask someone else what your strengths are, and that can always be helpful. It's good to have people around you that build you up. My definition of confidence is really just belief in my worth, my abilities, and my intelligence. But um, I'd like for some other people to share what their definition of confidence is. You can just unmute and say it. You don't have to raise your hand.
For me, I think confidence is it. Yeah, the bottom line is believing in yourself, but also believing in yourself in uncomfortable comfort situations and knowing that you have the skills to make it through those situations.
Oh, I like that. Thank you.
For me, confidence, it's believing in yourself, but I think it's also about accepting and knowing who you are and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, but knowing that, you can troubleshoot whatever arises, whatever problem arises.
I love that because we can't be confident in ourselves if we're constantly comparing ourselves to others or trying to be like them. If we're accepting who we are, then that helps us to be more confident.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Um, thanks, guys. The next one, this is a video, and I've got all this content from other people up front, so I really feel like it's worth it. It's 11 minutes, and they interview Dr. Kristen Neff, and I have seen her cited by so many other sources. In fact, I was in an EAP webinar the other day on, maybe it was on resilience, and she was cited in there as well. I've seen her cited by a lot of sources, and I like what she has to say here. Uh, Funnily enough, she doesn't like the term self-esteem, but that's fine. We can talk about that after the video because what she has to say about self-compassion having an effect on our self-esteem, our self-confidence is, I think, really worthwhile. So one thing I thought was really stood out to me was that where she said most people aren't even aware of how much they're suffering when that suffering is coming from the way they're treating themselves. So let's see. So she defined self-esteem as how we view our self-worth as compared to others. But for me, my self-esteem, the way I esteem my own self, is inherent from being a human being. That's my self-worth just comes from being a person, and so that's not something that can change. But definitely my confidence is affected by how I perceive other people might see me or see my talents or abilities. But what about you? What are your definitions of self-esteem that might be slightly different from confidence? How do you define it?
I don't know if it's a definition per se, but I listened to a guy who has talked about kind of this comparing to others, and he said that comparison is the thief of joy. And he talks about how, like, this girl said, I felt pretty until that girl walked into the room. And so it's just like comparing yourself to others is the thief of joy when you're starting to compare yourself with others. But I think that, like, for me, definition of self-esteem would be, am I improving? Am I getting better? Am I better than I was yesterday or last year? And so that's how I kind of, keep mine up anyway.
I like that comparison to yourself and looking at your progress. Anybody else?
I like that too. And I would add for me that my self-esteem also comes to my set of values that I have, that I believe in. And so if I feel like I'm doing good and living up to the values that I have, then that helps me feel better about myself and my self-esteem goes up.
I like that. I think that definitely has an effect for me too. So when there's a disconnect between your actions and your beliefs, then that will certainly cause your self-esteem to take a hit. Anyone else?
Just a thought I had.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm not on camera because I'm not camera ready.
Fine.
Today.
I mean, we're all silently judging you, so just kidding. It's not we. It's great. Don't let that affect your self-esteem.
You're funny. I think a lot of times we base our self-esteem off of our weaknesses. I'm not good because of this or that. And I think we need to more focus on the strengths that we have, base our self-esteem off of, what we have done, what we've accomplished, what we're good at, because we judge ourselves, our worst against someone's best. It's so easy to do that when we really should just be looking at our best, what we've accomplished.
Brittany, I love that. And you will probably not be surprised to hear that looking at our strengths plays a big part in when we talk later about how do we increase our self-esteem. So that's really great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I just add one thing to that?
Yes,
too?
please.
I would just add that I think you can develop self-esteem by focusing on things that bring you joy, and perhaps find, in those items that bring you joy or make you happy, you can perhaps find acceptance of who you are, a better defining characteristic of who you are by what makes you happy and brings you joy.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. Dr. Neff gave an example of a coach not giving feedback well as an example of how we might criticize ourselves. And then she gave an example of how a coach might give you more positive or more constructive feedback. And it reminded me of Squire and how we give feedback. When we had the Squire Ascent training, one of the things we talked about, and then when we had the training most recently on our evaluations, we talked about usually we will tell the person what we think they're doing well, but then also what needs to be improved. So we kind of give both of those. So one way we can give ourselves feedback in the same way is by doing what we learn in the Craig Manning training. Can someone explain that for those who haven't been to Craig Manning, the 3-to-1?
Well, Craig Manning tells us that every night we should write down 3 things that we did well and 1 thing we can improve.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah,
have you done that?
The wording. I have done it. And
how did it help, or did you see a difference?
Absolutely. When I do that at night, I wake up. I'm not a happy morning person. Mornings are just not my thing. Yeah. But when I do this at night, I do actually wake up happier in the morning.
I'm not a very good nighttime routine person, but I need to get better because I think that's something I'd like to incorporate. And I've seen that same technique suggested by a lot of other sources. One of them is this Science of Happiness, which is a podcast that's in the resources document too. It's part of the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley, and they have their guests try out a practice that is proven by their research to increase happiness. And so one of their guests chose that. And of course, they found it really helpful. And they talk about how practices in self-compassion measurably increase happiness. So self-compassion, like it is on the first point here, self-compassion leads to self-confidence and self-efficacy, greater happiness. It's all interconnected. And various studies show that when people fail, but they treat themselves with compassion, just repeating again what Dr. Neff said, they are more likely to try again and persist, or try a new goal instead of being, oh, I can't do anything, forget it. So I think self-compassion is certainly such an important component. And so she talked about the 3 essential elements of self-compassion. Being kind to yourself rather than harshly judgmental. And she emphasized it's not just the words, it's the tone. And realizing that sense of common humanity, that as humans, we're all going to have good days and bad days and successes and failures. So it's just part of the human experience. So having a failure does not make us abnormal. It's just, we're just human. That's the way it goes. And we just learn from it and move on. And then practicing mindfulness, being present with what is, even if what is might be painful, unpleasant, or unwanted. Has anyone consciously worked on any of these 3 elements? You know, mindfulness is really popular. I have a hard time with mindfulness because I have ADD. My mind just wanders so much. It's really struggle. But has anyone else practiced mindfulness? No one that wants to share about it. That's okay. But hopefully if you had, or if you try it, you'll notice a difference in your confidence or your self-esteem when you put that into practice. So now I've got some articles that I found, and I really, like I said, I love research, and I didn't want to just give 10 tips from, Women's Day, written by who knows who with journalistic credentials. So I tried to dig a little deeper and find some articles that were written by people who have actual credentials and experience in this and are well-regarded or peer-reviewed articles. So hopefully, while these are still tips, they are things that are a little deeper and will be more helpful. So the first one, and links again to these articles are in the notes. The first one, The 8 Steps to Improving Your Self-Esteem, is by Allison Abrams, who's a licensed clinical social worker. And she said the first thing is to be mindful. She said, without this awareness, we can easily fall into the trap of believing our self-limiting talk. Don't believe everything you think. Thoughts are just that, thoughts. As soon as you find yourself going down the path of self-criticism, gently note what is happening, be curious about it, and remind yourself those are thoughts, not facts. The second one is change the story. We all have a narrative or a story we've created about ourselves that shapes our self-perceptions. If we want to change that story, we have to understand where it came from and where we receive the messages we tell ourselves. Whose voices are we internalizing? So if we're internalizing the voices of people who told us that we'd never amount to anything, or that we're idiots, or whatever that might be, then those are not the thoughts you want to have in your brain. You want to find your own voice and help your own voice to be more positive and more kind to yourself. And research really does demonstrate that fluency training in positive affirmations can lessen symptoms of depression as measured by self-report using the Beck Depression Inventory. That's the test that psychologists and psychiatrists use to see kind of the extent of your depression to help with diagnosis. And one of the things they suggested was writing down as many positive things as you can about yourself in 1 minute. And we've got kind of a similar exercise that's going to be in our worksheet. And they said larger numbers of written positive statements are correlated with greater improvement. So if you tell yourself 3 positive things over and over, you won't have as much of a positive improvement. You still have some, but the degree of improvement is going to be greater if you have, say, 10. Coincidentally, the number in our exercise. Not a coincidence. Okay, so we, let's see. The third one was avoid falling into the compare and despair rabbit hole. And I love that term. She says, 2 things I emphasize are to practice acceptance and stop comparing yourself to others. Just because someone else appears happy on social media or even in person doesn't mean they're happy. And that's something that we see a lot with social media, that we need to remember that what people are putting out to the world isn't necessarily all of themselves, and we need to not compare ourselves to others. Number 4 is channel your inner rock star. Recognize what your strengths are and the feelings of confidence they engender. So we have another exercise that you can do later that is kind of marking off your strengths. And they suggest asking yourself, was there a time in your life when you had better self-esteem? What were you doing at that stage of your life? So you can kind of connect with that. If it's difficult for you to identify your unique gifts, ask a friend to point them out to you. Sometimes it's easier for others to see the best in us than it is to see it in ourselves. And the 5th one was exercise. Many studies have shown a correlation between exercise and higher self-esteem, and other forms of self-care like proper nutrition and sufficient sleep have similar positive effects on your self-perception. Do unto others is about volunteering, and being of service to others helps take you out of your head. When you're able to help someone else, it makes you less focused on your own issues. I know I've definitely seen that in my own life, and they do talk about how it doesn't always have to be volunteering at the homeless center, or doing something, a big service project, or even one that's regular, that just those small acts of kindness toward others that you come into contact with, or even putting out positive thoughts or prayers for others, can help have that same good feeling come back to you. Forgiveness. Is there someone in your life you haven't forgiven? An ex-partner, a family member, yourself? By holding on to feelings of bitterness or resentment, we keep ourselves stuck in a cycle of negativity. If we haven't forgiven ourselves, shame will keep us in the same loop. And it gives a Buddhist meditation on forgiveness that's short and sweet. I liked it. Number 8 is remember that you're not your circumstances. Learning to differentiate between your circumstances and who you are is the key to self-work, that we are not our circumstances. We're all born with infinite potential and equal worth as human beings. To recognize, the key is to recognize self-worth. It already exists in each person. And you'll find that some of these ideas are similar to the ideas that other people have thrown out. And I think that's because those are the things that are proven through research over and over to be true and to have an impact on our self-esteem. And maybe those things that we are hearing more than once are the ones that we should work on first, because they seem to be, everyone agrees that those are helpful. So does anybody have any comments on that before we look at the next one?
I have a comment.
Yes.
You know, about changing the story. I have a brother who was kind of the class clown in high school, and he had a teacher who told him he would never amount to anything. And this same brother who's he just turned 45, he's finishing up his medical residency. You know, it took him a while to get there, but he didn't let that stop him. His ultimate goal was to become a doctor. And, you know, he went to chef school for a while, or went to chef school, kind of had a hard time figuring out life. But I think the fact that he knew what he wanted and he wasn't going to let what other people told him, he wasn't going to let that stop him, that he did complete that goal. And I think a lot of us too, we just need to look at whatever story we're telling ourselves or someone else is telling us and find a way to get past that.
That is such a great example. Thank you so much. The next article is by Guy Winch. He's an expert in psychological and emotional health. And he says that as wonderful as it is to have higher self-esteem, it turns out that improving it is no easy task. Yeah, otherwise we'd all have great self-esteem all the time. Despite the endless array of articles, programs, and products promising to enhance our self-esteem, the reality is that many of them do not work, and some are even likely to make us feel worse. Our self-esteem is unstable. It can fluctuate daily, if not hourly. But it is certainly impossible to improve our self-esteem if we go about it in the right way. So here's his take on what's the right way to not only build it, but have it be lasting. So the first one was use positive affirmations, and he adds correctly. Positive affirmations such as, I'm going to be a great success, are very popular, but they have one critical problem. They tend to make people with low self-worth feel worse about themselves. Why? Because when our self-esteem is low, it's simply too contrary to our existing beliefs. And I have found that to be true. You feel stupid and you're like, why am I saying these things that are patently untrue? So for affirmations to work when your self-esteem is lagging, tweak them to make them more believable. For example, change I'm going to be a great success to I'm going to persevere until I succeed. Number 2 is identify your competencies, but then he adds, and develop them. So not just look at what you're good at, make your strengths stronger. It's like channeling a rock star, but it has that development aspect. So he says, if you pride yourself on being a good cook, throw more dinner parties. If you're a good runner, sign up for races and train for them. Figure out your core competencies and find opportunities that accentuate them. Number 3 was learn to accept compliments. And I think a lot of people struggle with this. When we feel bad about ourselves, we tend to be more resistant to compliments, though that's when we most need them. So set yourself the goal to tolerate compliments when you receive them, even if they make you uncomfortable. And instead of when someone says, oh, I like your shirt, they don't care that you don't need to tell them that you got it from the bargain bin or at Savers. They just like your shirt. So say thank you. Or if they compliment your hair, you don't need to say, oh, really, it only took me like 5 minutes. It's fine. Just say thank you. You don't have to give explanations for the things that someone is complimenting you on. Just say thank you. Eliminate self-criticism and introduce self-compassion. So this goes back to positive self-talk, and that when we do practice positive self-talk, it will avoid damaging. So it says, when our critical inner monologue kicks in, if we are able to switch it to self-talk, it'll avoid damaging our self-esteem further with critical thoughts and build it up instead. The 5th one is affirm your real worth. And he gives an example that this is not a quick and fast one. This is interesting. To revive your self-esteem after it's sustained a blow. So something happened, it didn't go well, and you took a hit to your self-esteem. Make a list of qualities you have that are meaningful in this specific context. If you got rejected by your date, list qualities that make you a good relationship prospect, like being loyal or emotionally available. If you fail to get a work promotion, list qualities that make you a valuable employee, like a strong work ethic or that you're responsible. Then choose one of the items on your list and write a brief essay to yourself, 1 to 2 paragraphs, about why the quality is valuable and likely to be appreciated by other people in the future. Do that every day for a week or whenever you need a self-esteem boost. So I thought that was interesting. It does sound like that's definitely more work, but that's why he's talking about building lasting self-esteem. If you are struggling with that, there is no quick fix. It does take work. And then the last area is self-efficacy. This is an article by Kendra Cherry, who is a psychologist and educator. And let's see. She defines self-efficacy as a person's belief in their ability to succeed in a particular situation. And that's kind of how I feel about it. It's a belief that my actions will have the desired effect or outcome. Does anyone have a different definition for self-efficacy? I feel like it's pretty universal, but let me know if you have something different.
Amanda?
Yes.
Amber just posted in the chat.
Oh, okay.
But it was back when you were talking about mindset.
Oh, yeah.
She just shared a quote. She said, "Your mind is a garden. Your thoughts are the seeds. You can grow flowers or you can grow weeds."
Oh anyway. My gosh, I love that. Thank you so much, Amber. Okay, so on self-efficacy, it plays a role not only in how you feel about yourself, but in whether or not you successfully achieve your goals in life. Our belief in our own ability to succeed plays a role in how we think, how we act, and how we feel about our place in the world. And it also determines what goals we choose to pursue, how we go about accomplishing those goals, and how we reflect upon our own performance. So basically, self-efficacy affects the whole trajectory of your life because those are all things that move you forward. So people with a weak sense of self-efficacy, they avoid challenging tasks. They believe that difficult things are beyond their capabilities. They focus on their failings and the negatives, and then they lose confidence in their abilities. So even the things that they start out feeling good about get weaker. But people with a strong sense of self-efficacy develop a deeper interest in the activities that they participate in, form a stronger sense of commitment to their interests and activities. And that kind of goes back to that other tip of, if you feel like you have a strength, develop it further. Recover quickly from setbacks and disappointments, and they view challenging problems as tasks to be completed. Like, it's going to be hard, but I'm just going to do it and then move on to the next thing. So they gave 4 ways to build self-efficacy, which I feel like these ones were good. And it's, let's see, there's a comment in there from Charlotte. She did the presentation on managing stress yesterday where they said something similar. You're good at surviving stress events because you've survived every one so far. If you have another stress event, you will do well. Was that the EAP stress presentation? So I did that one and it was so good. You guys, there's a lot of good EAP free webinars that that we get as part of that program.
No, it was a church-related one from a psychologist in the area.
Very nice. Thank you. Okay, so like I said, some of these tips are repeated by multiple sources. That means those are ones that are going to be particularly good to focus on. So celebrate your success. Mastery experiences play a critical role in the establishment of self-efficacy. And their research actually identified this as the single most effective way to create a strong sense of self-belief. So cheering yourself on in recognizing when you have a success. When you succeed at something, you're able to build a powerful belief in your ability. I think this was in a comment someone else said too, and failure can undermine those feelings, but they do have a caveat here that the ideal sorts of successes are not necessarily those that come easily. If you experience a lot of easy success, you may find yourself giving up more readily when you finally do encounter failure. So work on setting goals that are achievable, but not necessarily easy. But I will say, if you are really struggling, you still might need some quick wins. So check the resources out, because one of those articles is especially good for that, some quick wins. Observe others, and this isn't to be confused with the compare and despair one, but this talks about modeling. And for other projects I've done in school, I read a lot about research into modeling, and it's really an important means of establishing and strengthening self-efficacy. When we look at someone and it's someone like us, like when we're recruiting more women to be in accounting, it's important to have women be at recruiting events, and so they see women at all levels, including managers and partners. Then these female students say, oh, I can do that too. That's an example to them, and even subconsciously it tells them I could have that path as well, and they're more likely to pursue it. So it works the same for our self-efficacy. And one key is how similar the model is to yourself. The more alike you feel you are, the more likely it is that it'll increase your sense of self-efficacy. So if you observe others putting in effort and succeeding, then we believe that we can do the same. Positive affirmations, back to that one. Hearing positive feedback from others can help improve your sense of self-efficacy, but try to avoid asking for feedback from people you know are more likely to have a negative or critical view of your performance. Obviously, we're all going to get negative feedback sometimes because we're not perfect. We're humans. We already talked about that. But if you're seeking it out specifically so you can build your self-efficacy, do not ask someone who you know is not going to give you good feedback, because your goal in that moment is to feel better about yourself. So, and to see your strengths. Negative comments have such a powerful undermining effect, but also social feedback alone isn't enough to build your self-belief, but it can be a useful tool when you need a little extra encouragement. And then the last one's pay attention to your thoughts and emotions, and that goes back to mindfulness and that positive self-talk. Look for ways to replace negativity with positive self-talk that promotes self-belief. So after going over these, we've only got 5 minutes left. I'm going to drop those into the chat for you. There's a self-esteem worksheet that has some exercises where you can look at your strengths and kind of check off the things that you feel are your strengths that you can reflect on. And then you create positive statements about yourself. So it suggests that you start with 10 statements and say that for one day, but then every day you add one additional statement for 10 days. So by the end, you've got 20 statements. You're telling yourself, just spending a few minutes a couple times a day, reinforcing those beliefs in yourself and trying to replace the negative self-talk with positive self-talk. And then the resources have the full podcast, the link for the full podcast, the video, the articles we talked about, plus some other ones. And the exercise came out of this book that I bought for this, the Self-Esteem workbook. So there's a link to that as well, and some other things that I thought you might enjoy and would be helpful. So does anybody have anything in the time that we have left? I should have inserted a clip of the Jeopardy music for waiting.
That's funny. Okay, tell me how you've liked the workbook.
I bought it just for this. I haven't done it, and because it goes with the book, I'm not sure about it. So I'm not sure that I have the time to devote to doing that right now, because I feel like right now I'm in survival mode. And if I get out of survival mode, like when we get back to kind of our regular routines, and then I'll work on this some more. But for right now, I don't have the mental bandwidth for that.
Sounds very reasonable.
So I mean, just to be perfectly honest. So, I mean, it's great.